Hey guys, Cameron, another movie for guys. Now, this movie reviewing. This is a movie that I really did not know how it was going to be. I kind of just went into this movie very unprepared for what exactly I was getting into, but I checked it out anyway, and that movie is a movie that I think pretty much defines what a January movie should be, and that, of course, is Monster Trucks. Guys, I really had no opinion for this movie whatsoever. Some of it looked really dumb and fun, but then other parts looked really stupid, and not stupid in the sense that it would look, funny. It looked just stupid, and I really did not know how this movie was going to be. I knew it was either going to be really fun or really fucking bad, so I really didn't know if I was going to like it or not. And coming out of it, I will definitely say Monster Trucks isn't a horrible movie. I do think that this is a genuinely fun, ridiculous, very illogical film. It's definitely not perfect, and it's not a great movie. I wouldn't even say it's a good movie. I'd say it's an okay film with some very fun moments in there, and is definitely a lot better than what it probably could have ended up being. But let's get to the plot of Monster Trucks, which that's something I actually was kind of impressed with. They actually did try to give a genuine, compelling plot to this movie. It doesn't exactly work, but they definitely did try. Basically, we focus on this boy Trip, and he is quite antisocial. He doesn't really have many friends. He doesn't really fit in at school. He's at a point in his life as a senior where he just wants things to end. He wants to get out of his house. He wants to go somewhere else, and he just isn't really feeling at home in, where he is anymore. So he wants to get out, and basically he works at this auto mechanic shop, and he ends up finding this monster in the oil, basically, where there is this basically this oil worker wants to find this alien and basically use him to get information and things like that. And he starts to bond with this monster, basically known as Creech. And Creech actually ends up being part of his truck because Creech has these incredible abilities, and he realizes that Creech actually can control this truck, and hence the term Monster Trucks, and that basically is the plot of Monster Trucks overall. But let's just get into this movie, starting off with the cast. Because when it comes to these January movies, you really never know with the cast. I mean, sometimes it could go really well, sometimes it could go, really bad, and for the most part, I'm not gonna lie, the acting wasn't bad here. I think for the most part, everyone actually did a really good job. Now, Lucas Till is not someone I would say is a great actor. He's been given great roles before. I think he is fantastic in the X-Men films, but he really hasn't had anything that great. I mean, his gig as MacGyver or the Hannah Montana the movie, these aren't exactly great things to be recognized for. And I do think he tries to do a good job in Monster Trucks. You can tell he's genuinely having a lot of fun and that he's really giving it his all, and you definitely do feel it. And I definitely felt that charisma from him. He actually did a good job in this movie. I know I've said before that he doesn't really have much charisma, but when you give him a fun role like this, it can work really well. The problem is you don't believe for a second that this is an actual high school kid and that he's actually going through this situation. It just is very unrealistic to think about, and because of that, it's very hard to get behind his character. As much as Lucas Till, I think, is having a fun time in this role, I do feel that he was quite miscasted. Now, I get why they cast him. They casted him so people go to the movie and say, oh, Lucas Till, I'm interested. But I really do feel that this would have actually been better if it was an unknown actor. I think if it was an unknown actor, we could have maybe gotten a lot more from him. But because it was Lucas Till, I wasn't expecting much from him. I didn't really get a ton from him. And while I did want to like his character, again, I just didn't find him to be that believable. He tries, definitely, but it just didn't really work. And I think the way they wanted it to. And I think if it was a different actor, this could have gone a lot better. It's not a terrible role by any means. It's just not as good as I think what they were aiming for. Now, Jane Levy in this movie is a character that at times is a bit insufferable because she plays Trip's tutor, but also clearly this girl that has genuine feelings for him and a crush on him and basically follows him anywhere he goes. And there are some points in the movie where I did find her to be a bit annoying, definitely, but once these two actually do start to bond, I actually saw genuine chemistry from them. It was actually really sweet. There's this one really great scene with them where she realizes that Trip actually is smart smart and that he's actually not as weird as everyone thinks he is. And I thought it was a genuinely well done scene. They did a good job with that. The problem is the movie is not really about their relationship, and they focus, I think, a little bit too much on their overall relationship. And I definitely cared about them. I think they had pretty good chemistry, but Creech as a character, they do stuff with him, definitely, but he's just not as memorable as I think the movie wants Creech to be. I mean, they have these two bond, definitely. You know, they try to get Trip and Creech to have this bond together. You just don't really feel it. It kind of feels more like an afterthought, like Creech is just kind of thrown in there for all these visual gags, and I thought that the two overall, you know, you believed in their friendship, definitely, but they just didn't really give Creech a ton to do, in my opinion. I feel like Creech could have had a lot more to do in this movie, but they focus a lot more on Jane Levy and Lucas Till's relationship, and it kind of did take the focus away from Creech a bit, definitely. And as for the rest of the cast in the movie, they're fine. Rob Lowe plays your typical mustache-twirling villain who's just this government agent, and he's doing all this stuff because he's a government agent and he wants to, you know, get information on this monster. We've seen this plot a million times. It goes in exactly the direction you think it's going in. Danny Glover was actually fun in this movie. I like seeing Danny Glover here. I thought he was definitely pretty good here. He definitely seemed like he was having a good time. Amy Ryan plays Trip's mother, and she really doesn't have much else to do, and that's something I definitely will say. The rest of the cast in this movie really doesn't have much else to do. It's mainly Lucas Till, Jane Levy, Rob Lowe, and Creech who are the most developed. The rest of the characters are just kind of there for a scene if they need to be. But the cast in general was a lot better than I thought they were going to be. This could have been a really horrible cast overall with some really terrible, embarrassing performances, but because of how fun I think everyone was having, it really did elevate the overall acting overall. So the acting is really good, but now let's get to the directing and the screenplay, because the directing here I think works sometimes, and then other times it doesn't, because I will say right off the bat, this is an extremely self-aware film. They know exactly what they're trying to be. They're not trying to be anything different. They're just trying to be a fun, ridiculous film, and I think for the most part they did succeed with that. I definitely did have a lot of fun, many moments throughout this movie. They did a really good job in portraying that tone. I thought the directing was definitely well done in that regard, and there's some scenes that are absolutely ridiculous, but again, it's a movie that's not meant to be taken too seriously, so I thought they did a good job with that. However, there are some scenes that they probably really should have rethought, because this is one of those movies where characters will do things and there's no consequence whatsoever, and I know many reviewers have talked about this. There are scenes in this movie where they go on to where, you know, the truck can fly, it can do all these crazy things, and many times there is a ton of severe property damage, and at no point in the movie is there any sort of, you know, no one pauses or thinks, oh, this isn't a good idea, or thinks about the people that they've killed or something like that. I understand that this is a kid's movie, but it really is a big deal. I mean, this is like severe property damage. I mean, they take out like 5 cars at once. It's really nothing to glance over. It really is something that I think they could have maybe touched upon a bit more. But yeah, this is like severe property damage, and they get away with it with no consequence whatsoever. And that would work if it was the villain who, you know, the villain is just a merciless villain who doesn't really give a shit. But this is Trip, who we're supposed to care about, and he's making these terrible decisions, and at no point is he thinking that maybe he needs to maybe dial that down a bit and control Creech or something like that. They could have actually maybe benefited the plot a bit, but no, they didn't really do that, and it actually did hurt the film overall. When that stuff happened, it really did take me out of the movie. I mean, I get that it's supposed to be silly, but there's only so far you can go with not taking it too seriously, and something like that, it is a serious matter. It's something that you probably should think about, and it actually did hurt the overall film, in my opinion at least. Definitely, I didn't think that worked very well. And as well as the characters, like I said, they try to do stuff with Trip, but you just really don't believe it. Because of Lucas Till, it just didn't really work for me. I don't really think Lucas Till was the best choice for this role. I think they could have gotten someone who looked like a high schooler. Lucas Till looks like he'd be teaching at the high school. He doesn't look like a high school student. He looks like a high school teacher. And it really didn't feel like it really fit him in this role. You know, it seems like he's been stuck in this role for a long time. time. And, Lucas Till, he's pretty close to 30. And I get that, yes, Corey Monteith, when he did Glee, he was 30 and he did it fine, but some people age differently, and Lucas Till, he's definitely significantly aged. It's very easy to tell, and it really did affect, that character overall. And I will say that the story in this movie is extremely illogical. I mean, it really makes no sense whatsoever. This monster in the I mean, it's silly. It definitely is silly, but it's really not something you need to... If you think about this movie, you're not going to like it. I'm going to say that right now. If you really think about what's going on, you're not going to like this movie. You need to try to turn your brain off and not take it too seriously. But that can only go so far, really. And the movie sometimes does a good job with that, and sometimes it doesn't. Most of the villain stuff, I really didn't care about. I'm not gonna lie. Why? Because I've seen in like 50 movies. I know exactly where it's gonna go. So anytime that Rob Lowe or his sidekick came on, I checked out of the movie. I really did not care about anything that was going on there. I get why we had a villain, but all that stuff completely checked me out of the film. When we got back to Trip, then I was back in. But when that stuff happened, I just really could not get into the story because I've seen the story done a million times, and they didn't really try to do anything differently. If they did, that would have been cool, but the movie's not exactly focused on character. The problem is, they try to. They definitely try to develop these characters, and it really doesn't work, I have to say, because the movie, in my opinion, when it comes to the characters, it doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to be this coming-of-age story that's actually really heartwarming and has a good story about finding friends and finding your voice and finding your place in the world? Or does it want to be this ridiculous action Michael Bay type film? It doesn't really know what it wants to be, and that really did overall affect the movie, in my opinion, at least. I think definitely the story in general was just very messy and it didn't really work. But the cinematography here is completely ridiculous, and the movie really does know how silly the cinematography really is. I mean, there's so many fun car chases in the movie. There's so many fun, ridiculous sequences. I mean, especially the ending. The ending is completely ridiculous. It involves a car basically eating another car. It's completely ridiculous the direction they go, but I thought it was pretty funny how they did it. It definitely did get a few chuckles out of me, but notice I said the word chuckles. I didn't say the word laughs. I found the movie to be somewhat funny. I didn't find it absolutely hysterical. It's nothing that I'd say, oh, I had a really great time watching it. It was a fun one-time watch, but I don't really know if I could see myself watching this movie again. I definitely will say that. The score in this movie, I will definitely admit, was a bit jarring at times because sometimes they play something like Barracuda or some really good metal music, because that's what I think of when I hear Monster Trucks. What I don't think of is Home by Philip Phillips, which for some reason they choose to end this movie. It doesn't really make a ton of sense why they chose that, but the musical score in general, besides the soundtrack, was fine, I guess. Not really much to it. And the editing, this movie really did fly by. It didn't ever feel too long or too short. It really did fly by for me. I was into it, except for when the villains were on. I was into it for the most part, and it definitely, like I said, the editing was a lot better than I think it could have been. So overall, Monster Trucks is a completely disposable film that's really silly and ridiculous and will appeal to kids really, really well. But I will definitely say if you are not a young kid or you're not able to suspend your disbelief, it's really not a movie that I think you're going to enjoy. I think it's a lot better than what it could have ended up being. Definitely, it's not nearly as bad, and I definitely did have a fun time watching many of the scenes, but because of how illogical the movie was, and how it actually did try to add some hearts and things like that, and it really didn't work in the way I wanted it to, in general, like I said, I really could not see myself watching this movie again. But because of how fun some of the scenes were, I am overall going to give Monster Trucks a 2.5 out of 5 or a C. So overall, guys, my review of Monster Trucks. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Did you find it silly and ridiculous? And were you able to just have a fun time with it? Or was the tone very jarring for you? And did you really think about it and things like that? But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be, I think, for tonight's episode, Victoria. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.